千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. As always, I would like to extend a warm welcome to one and all. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Now, this whole idea of the ideal place is not unique to Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu was one of many sages who studied the Tao back in the old days. Other sages, some before him, some came after him, they studied from the same Tao. Everyone knew that there was a vision of the ideal place from the Tao perspective. The Tao incorporates a vision for the world as it can be, the world as it could be. So Lao Tzu was not the only one. Other sages, as I mentioned, some came before him, some after. A prominent sage who came after Lao Tzu, who, according to legend, is a disciple of Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu was a master, a mentor, a teacher to this other sage who was a younger man by multiple decades, and that was Confucius. You might not have heard about this, that Confucius regarded Lao Tzu as his master, but that is how it's presented in legends. Now, when Confucius studied from the same source, it is the same ancient Tao that predated both Confucius and Lao Tzu by thousands of years. Specifically, we often talk about how Lao Tzu lived 2,500 years ago. We forget that the tradition of the Tao was before him by at least more than 2,000 years. So roughly 4,800 years ago, that was the time of the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi. That was the time of I Ching, the Book of Changes. That is the source. That's the mother lode of ancient wisdom that was mined by Lao Tzu and Confucius alike. Now, everybody studied the Tao and understood it in their own unique ways, with their own unique perspectives. So Confucius had his own way of describing the ideal place. He called it 大同世界, the world of 大同. So 大同, those are the two characters that you see in the heading of this particular slide. The first character, 大, it means big, vast, great. 同 is togetherness, sometimes translated as commonwealth or unity in this case. So the emphasis here is that they drew from the same source. When you understand how things actually work in that sense, you then are no longer so taken by some explanations in academia about how Lao Tzu and Confucius were at odds with one another, that they represented arch enemies. That's absolute nonsense. They probably were master students, master disciples, or student teacher. And then what happened is that When Confucius learned these ancient Tao concepts, he also discussed those concepts with his own students. These were recorded in Li Ji, the Book of Rites, one of the ancient classics. And Da Tong turned out to be one of the most influential concepts from Chinese culture. What I would like to do, I never had a really good chance to explain what Da Tong is all about. So this is the time for us to do that. Let me give you what the ancient text looks like. And it's much more important in this case for you to get the idea, the concepts, the meaning, rather than character by character explanation of how the translation was derived. So let me provide you with the translation along with some commentary. First, it says, when the great Tao prevails, the world is a commonwealth shared by all. Two things to talk about there. Number one, it specifically mentions the great Tao. At the time of Laozi and Confucius, they both considered themselves to be students of the Tao, same source. Point number two, just like the vision of Laozi, Confucius is talking about something, a commonwealth that is shared by all, that nobody's left out. Everybody gets to benefit. It's for the group, not for the individual. And you can see that there's an emphasis in Laozi as well to talk about more than just one person. Then they choose the virtuous and capable as leaders. They promote trust and cultivate goodwill. So the original text is not specific as to pronouns. So this could be the virtuous and capable are chosen. Chosen by whom? If we say they, the people, that's actually an early expression of democracy. Now, it could be reinterpreted as divine will, like monarchy. Either way, this is talking about how only the virtuous and capable should lead people into this commonwealth. In modern times, we can read democracy into that and say, in a democratic process, the people choose the virtuous and capable. Next, thus, people do not regard only their own parents as parents, nor do they regard only their own children as children. What does that mean? It means this is a close, tight-knit community. This is a village, so to speak, where the elders belong to everyone, where the children belong to everyone, regardless of who their parents are. This is actually something that's widespread in Asian societies. So you will see from time to time where in Asian cultures, in ancient times, Confucian ideals has spread throughout all of Asia, not just ancient China. So for the Asians, tight-knit community where friends of your parents, all of them are uncles and aunts. And all the kids, well, they are the children of the village. Even if they're not your own flesh and blood, you would treat them as if they were. This is the genesis of that concept. Then we have the old are cared for until death. The adults are gainfully employed, and the children are nurtured. No one is left out of the picture. In modern times, we would say all the different age demographics are well taken care of. Then we have widows, widowers, orphans, childless seniors, the disabled and diseased are all taken care of. So it's not just the different age demographics, it's also talking about the people who are bereft, people who have lost loved ones. If so, the community is there for them. The people who are disadvantaged, disease perhaps, handicap perhaps they're disabled in some way, the community is just as there for them as they are for those who are healthy. So everyone is taken care of. It goes on. Next, we have men have their proper roles and women have their families. So of course, this passage comes from ancient times when men were expected to take on work that might be dangerous or labor intensive, while women were expected to stay home and care for family members. So this is reading to be a little bit dated from our modern sensibilities in the here and now. Today, as civilization progresses, we are definitely seeing gender roles evolve, and in many cases, no longer fit traditional delineations. So a modern reinterpretation of these lines would be that everyone, including men and women, have their proper roles. And it could be internal or external to the family unit. Women can and often have proper roles in the workplace. Men can and often have proper roles within the family. Continuing on. People hate to see a resource thrown away on the ground, but they do not necessarily keep it for themselves. So I was raised on these concepts. I hate to waste anything myself. At the same time, this is also saying that people are not necessarily selfish in hoarding resources for themselves. So there's no wasting and there's no hoarding. People, this goes on, they hate to not do their own work, but they do not necessarily work for themselves. So again, this is talking about the fulfillment and satisfaction when people are put to work doing what they're good at, what they're capable of. They don't necessarily work for themselves, they are working for the community as a whole. Not necessarily just in self-interest, although the Tao is not opposed to advancing your self-interest, but there's always a part of the work that contributes to the overall well-being of the group. So because of all of the above, we have the next part. Therefore, conspiracies do not thrive. Robberies, thefts, and criminal activities do not occur. And this continues on. Thus, people do not need to shut their doors when they go out. This is talking about how this ideal place, 大同, the great unity, is a very safe place with virtually no crime, virtually no violence among people, safety and security above all. And last line, this is called 大同, the great unity. Now, this is what Confucius expressed. So you may be wondering, well, it doesn't read like the small country with few people. It seems to have different takes on what the ideal place ought to be. But then we say that they drew from the same source, right? What is the commonality between the two? Well, in the typical teaching of chapter 80, it's never really addressed what the commonalities are. We're going to go there right now. you're going to see that it is actually quite easy to look at the two. From Confucius, 礼运大同, from Lao Tzu, 小国寡民. Now, what are the two characters, first of all, before 大同? 礼运, the two characters, the first character means propriety. And the second character means movement. Together, 礼运 is the path of propriety. When you walk on this path, you begin to understand right from wrong, and you move from ignorance to enlightenment. So it is often put together with 大同, the great unity. So what are the commonalities between the concepts expressed by Confucius and the concepts expressed by Lao Tzu? There are three major components that they intersect on. The first one, a strong sense of community. You're going to find that elements in both prominently. The second thing is the emphasis on the good life for one and all. Everybody, all together. Nobody is left out. And then yet another emphasis that is common to both, safety and security. They're just expressed in different ways. So these are the three pillars of the ideal place in the Tao. Take a look at a strong sense of community. Confucius expressed it in his own way, his own perspective, based on his own observations and what he felt would be good. And that is, remember he said, elders and children belong to everyone, that you treat the parents of other people as your own parents, the children of others as your own children. It's the elders and the children of the village, everybody together. And those in need, whether they are bereft, they have lost someone, they're sick, injured, whatever the case may be, they are cared for by the community. The community is there for them. That is a strong community right there. Lao Tzu felt the same. He just talked about it in different ways. Lao Tzu said, well, it's a small place with few people, so you really can get to know the people on an individual basis. Friendships, to Lao Tzu, the more important thing is to know people in depth and not have many shallow friendships where you don't really know the people at all. And in terms of community, the neighbors all provide mutual assistance. This is from the part where Lao Tzu talks about how people live close enough together, they're within visual and hearing range, so they can render mutual assistance. When something goes wrong, members of this community come to your door. Hey, just want to check, is everything okay? That is a strong community right there. Now let's talk about the good life for one and all. Confucius wanted that in his ideal, and he expressed it this way. He said, everyone plays a role, everyone contributes to society. That is to say, people do the work that they're good at, they make the contributions. He also said, resources are not wasted, nor are they hoarded. So that is the good life for one and all. Lao Tzu wanted the good life for one and all as well. He just talked about it differently. He said, everyone lives and enjoys the simple life. The simple life is the good life. And that when people interact with one another, they get along. There's no petty conflicts. There's no petty back and forth. Oh, you got me, I'm going to get you. There's none of that. There's just harmony. Harmony is the good life for one and all. Lastly, the emphasis on safety and security. So Confucius talked about it this way. There's virtually no crime, so people feel safe. What about Lao Tzu? How did he express safety and security? Well, he didn't talk about it in terms of crime. How could you when you're in the warring states and there's armies roaming the landscape? So for Lao Tzu, safety and security, he expressed it as people can take care of themselves. They're able to protect themselves. So I have drawn only the elements from the most accurate translations from both sides, Confucius and Lao Tzu. And you can see through the stylistic differences of the two sages that at the core, the essence of their thoughts and ideals are actually one and the same. And it is the Tao. Lastly, what we should do is to take the three major elements that you see here and apply those elements to our own lives. Here's what it looks like. Remember, we've got community, we've got the good life, we've got safety and security. So let's talk about some ideas. How do we create the ideal place with a strong sense of community? Well, I would suggest start with your immediate environment. That is, in the Tao, you always want to begin by establishing your own harmony within yourself. Once you have that, extend the harmony to your family. And once you have that, extend the harmony from your family to your neighbors, and then from your neighbors to your community. That's what I mean by start with your immediate environment. And I also have respect elders and nurture the young. So this is just about strengthening, building relationships with older people, younger people. The older people can become mentors and guides and advisors. And we already know, you and I already know, connecting with the young is something that can help us connect with our own original childlike nature. That's the Tao. Let's move on to the good life, the good life for all. How do we create that for ourselves? Well, if you were to ask Lao Tzu, he would say the good life is the simple life. Move toward simplifying your life. The more you can simplify your life, the better it becomes. The more joy you can have in that life. Then Confucius would chime in and say, well, you want to play your role, you want to do what you can to contribute to the team. There's a fulfillment and satisfaction there over and beyond what you are compensated for. So the good life is where you can simplify and where you can contribute. So both Lao Tzu and Confucius have advice that we can use. So what about safety and security? Well, in ancient times, that was definitely because it was the time of wars and battles. It was important for people to be able to protect themselves and their loved ones. Today, many of us, not all of us, many of us are fortunate enough to live in a relatively peaceful environment where we don't need to worry about war breaking out. That's not the same for everybody around the world. For us, though, safety and security can still be primary considerations. It just means we need to be prepared for disasters. And remember what I said was disasters could be natural or man-made. We want to be ready for them. We want to take common sense precautions. So that requirement doesn't go away just because we don't have impending wars. And lastly, establish and maintain security for everyone. This is what Confucius would say. he would say that, well, we can all be more secure. There's always room for improvement, especially a lot of us live in places that are not as fortunate as countries that follow Confucian concepts that have very low crime rates. We can all be careful. We can all help establish and maintain security for everybody. So we have talked quite a bit about the implications of the ideal place, the concept of the ideal place in the Tao. And you can see from our discussion that it's quite in-depth. There's a lot of different pieces. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.